And just like that, Hailey's life changed forever. But what happens next, you'll find out in tomorrow's episode, so make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. You won't want to miss it. We're just getting started. While you're here, drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from? It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Whether you're in New York, Manila, or somewhere in between, we're glad you're here. Your support means everything. See you tomorrow, same time, same place, with another twist. You won't believe, this stranger saved her life. Or did he? Hailey had been counting the days. For 22 long months, her world had been reduced to a dark, cold 8-foot room beneath the floorboards of a quiet suburban house, hidden from the world, from freedom and from hope. Time didn't pass normally down there. The walls never changed. The light bulb above her flickered sometimes, but it was the only thing that reminded her the world was still moving. She wasn't chained, but she might as well have been. Every step she took, every breath she made, it was all within the limits set by one man. Tyler. He used to say he loved her. He used to bring her tea and call it their quiet time. But love doesn't sound like locked doors and silence. Love doesn't look like a girl with bruises on her arms and fear in her eyes. And then one night, something changed. Tyler had forgotten to reset the lock after delivering her dinner. A simple mistake, a rushed moment. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he thought she'd given up. But Hailey hadn't. Not even close. The moment she heard the soft click of the latch not locking, her heart started to race. Her hands shook. She waited until 2 a.m., until she could hear his footsteps upstairs, fade into nothing. Then she crept out of that tiny room like a shadow, barefoot, heartbeat pounding so hard it echoed louder than her steps. The front door creaked. Of course it did. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Out the door, into the backyard, and then into the woods behind the house, where no streetlights reached. The cold air stung her face. Her thin shirt clung to her skin. But she kept running, crashing through branches, stumbling over rocks and roots, pushing forward with everything she had left inside. She didn't know exactly where she was going. All she knew was that she had to put miles, real, physical miles, between her and that house, between her and Tyler, between her and everything she'd been forced to survive. After about 2.7 miles, her legs gave out. She collapsed near the edge of a rural gas station parking lot, covered in dirt and leaves, her breath shallow, her lips trembling. But she was free, for the first time in nearly 2 years. Hailey looked up at the stars, no ceiling in the way, no locked door behind her, just the night sky and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. But freedom is fragile, and sometimes even after you run, the past still follows. Hailey didn't remember falling asleep. One minute she was lying near the edge of the gas station lot, bruised and shaking. The next, she was waking up to the soft rumble of a truck engine and headlights cutting through the early morning fog. Her body was frozen from the night air, her lips cracked, her throat dry. She tried to sit up, but pain shot through her legs. She hadn't realized how far she'd pushed them. The truck door creaked open. A pair of boots hit the pavement. "Hey," a calm voice called out, cautious but kind. "You okay?" Hailey flinched, scrambling backward. Her body screamed in protest, but fear overpowered the pain. "Whoa, whoa," the man said quickly, hands raised. "I'm not here to hurt you, I promise." He stepped closer, slowly. His flannel jacket was worn, his jeans dusty. A mechanic's hands. His voice wasn't sharp or controlling. It was grounded. Human. "My name's Miles," he added. "I live about 15 minutes down the road. Saw you lying here when I stopped for gas. You look like you've been through hell." Hailey's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You hungry, cold? I've got heat in the truck, water, food, whatever you need." Part of her screamed, "Don't trust him." Another part, the one that had survived 22 months in a locked room, whispered, "You don't have many options." She hesitated, then nodded once. Miles moved slowly, helping her into the passenger seat like she was made of glass. The heater blasted warmth into her frozen limbs, and for the first time in forever, she exhaled a breath that wasn't filled with fear. He didn't ask questions, not at first, just drove. Quietly, respectfully. His cabin was simple. A small, 650-square-foot place tucked between pine trees, about 10 miles outside town. No neighbors close enough to hear you scream, Hailey thought. But unlike Tyler's house, this place didn't feel like a trap. It felt peaceful. Miles opened the door, handed her the keys. Bathroom's through there. There's food in the fridge. My phone's on the counter. Use it however you want. He paused. You can leave if you need to. I won't stop you. Hailey stood there, stunned. No locks, no demands, no threats, just space, just freedom. She didn't speak much that first day. She wandered the edges of the room, eyes scanning every corner, checking windows and exits by instinct. Miles never followed, never hovered. He just let her exist. That night, as Hailey lay curled up on his couch wrapped in a thick flannel blanket, she stared at the ceiling, no flickering bulbs, no cages, and wondered if maybe, just maybe, this stranger might be the first person who didn't want to own her. But what she didn't know was that Tyler had already noticed she was missing, and he wasn't going to let her go without a fight. The next morning, the cabin smelled like coffee and rain. Hailey woke up on the couch, wrapped in the same flannel blanket. For a second, she forgot where she was. No creaking floorboards above her, no footsteps pacing with anger, no locked door. Just the soft hum of a kettle and a voice humming along to an old country song playing low on the radio. She sat up slowly, her muscles still sore, but the panic wasn't as sharp today. Her eyes scanned the room again, still no signs of danger, no tricks, just the man who found her standing by the stove in a worn hoodie and socks, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. Miles turned, surprised to see her awake. "Morning," he said gently. "Didn't know if you'd want some, but I made it anyway." He held out the mug. "You can throw it at me if you don't like it." A corner of her mouth almost turned up. Almost. "I don't even know what kind of coffee I like anymore," she said softly. Voice rough from days of silence. Miles shrugged. "Then we'll figure it out. Try everyone if we have to." She took the cup. Warmth hit her hands first, then her chest. They sat in silence for a while, Hailey curled into the corner of the couch, Miles across the room in an old armchair. He didn't press her for details, didn't ask who she was running from. He let her breathe, let her just be. Over the next few days, the ice between them began to crack. Not shatter, but gently, slowly, piece by piece. One morning she helped him chop firewood, even though her hands were still healing. Another night, they watched an old black-and-white movie on VHS while eating frozen pizza off paper plates. There were moments of laughter, real ones, and moments where she'd drift off mid-sentence, eyes haunted by memories she hadn't dared speak aloud yet. One evening, Miles found her sitting outside on the front steps, wrapped in a hoodie that nearly swallowed her whole. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting gold and orange through the pines. He handed her a mug of tea this time. "No coffee tonight?" she asked. "I had a feeling you're more of a tea person," he said with a smile. She looked at him for a long moment. "You don't know me," she said. "No," he replied, "but I'd like to." And for the first time in months, maybe years, Hailey didn't feel like prey. She didn't feel like a prisoner waiting for the door to slam shut. She felt seen, but just as she began to let her guard down miles away, a phone was ringing. Tyler had made his first call to a friend, someone who owed him a favor, and someone who was very, very good at finding people who didn't want to be found. The calm didn't last. For the first time in a long time, Hailey was starting to feel human again. She laughed, sometimes without realizing it. She could walk outside without looking over her shoulder. She even started cooking, nothing fancy. But to her, frying eggs without fear was freedom. But peace has a way of lulling you just enough to forget the storm might still be coming. And it was. Over 100 miles away, in a dark apartment filled with liquor bottles and broken promises, Tyler stared at an old photo of Hailey on his cracked phone screen. He hadn't heard from her in weeks. She'd vanished. No calls, no texts. The house was empty. But she wasn't just gone. She had run. That part burned. He opened an app, one she didn't know was still logged in, and traced her last known location. It was spotty, delayed, but it was enough. Back at the cabin, Miles had no idea someone was coming. He was outside chopping wood when Hailey came out to join him. She looked lighter today. The shadows under her eyes had started to fade. "Thought I'd try swinging the axe," she said, grinning. Miles smirked. "Careful. You might end up better at it than me." They shared a moment, a real one. But as the sun dipped low behind the hills, a black SUV rolled slowly down the gravel road, dust rising behind it like smoke. It stopped just beyond the tree line. The engine idled. Someone was watching. Hailey froze, her eyes locked on the vehicle. Her smile dropped instantly. "No," she whispered. "It can't be." Miles stepped in front of her. "Who is that?" But she didn't answer. She was already backing up, her hands trembling. The door to the SUV opened, and there he was. "Tyler, Hailey," he called out, stepping forward with that same twisted confidence she remembered, the kind that pretended to be love, but always came with bruises. "You need to leave," Miles said firmly, his voice calm but sharp. Tyler scoffed. "Who the hell are you? Her new boyfriend? She belongs with me." Hailey's voice cracked as she stepped forward. "I don't belong to anyone." "Hailey," Tyler said, softer now, fake concern dripping from his tone. "Come home. You're confused. This isn't you." She shook her head. "You kept me locked in a basement, Tyler. That wasn't love, that was control." Miles stood beside her, silent but steady. Tyler's face darkened. "You think this guy's going to protect you? He doesn't know you, I do." Hailey's hands balled into fists. Her voice was low, steady. "He doesn't have to know my past to respect my present." There was a standoff, a heavy silence. Then, finally, Tyler's lip curled, and he backed away. "This isn't over," he muttered. He got into the SUV and drove off, tires spitting. Gravel behind him. Hailey stood there, shaking, heart pounding, but she didn't fall apart because this time she wasn't alone. The silence after Tyler left was deafening. The black SUV had disappeared into the trees, but the tension still hung heavy in the air. Hailey stood in the driveway, staring at the road, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her whole body was trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally standing up to the man who had taken so much from her. Miles stood beside her, not saying anything. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. "He'll come back," Hailey whispered. "I know him. He won't let this go." Miles nodded slowly. "Then we don't give him the chance." They didn't waste time. Within the hour, they were packing bags, just the essentials: clothes, IDs, cash. Miles threw his old guitar into the back of the truck. Hailey stuffed a small photo of her and her sister into her backpack. No room for the past, but enough space for the pieces she wanted to carry. By nightfall, the cabin lights were off, the driveway was empty, and two shadows slipped into a dusty old pickup and drove off into the dark, leaving behind the trees, the tension, and everything that had ever made her feel small. They didn't have a set destination, just a direction. Away. Every mile a drove felt like peeling off another layer of pain. 10 miles, 20, then 30. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was sacred. The kind of silence that comes when you know the person beside you doesn't need words to understand. Eventually, they pulled into a roadside motel somewhere off Highway 93. It was small, barely lit, and smelled like old carpet, but it was safe. It was enough. That night, as Hailey lay on the scratchy motel sheets, staring at a water-stained ceiling, Miles sat by the window, watching the parking lot like a guard dog. She whispered, "You didn't have to do all this." He looked back. At her, eyes soft but steady. "Yeah, I did." She sat up, knees pulled to her chest. "I risked everything running from him. And now you're risking your life just by helping me." Miles leaned back in the chair. "Sometimes the biggest risks lead you to the people worth it." Hailey didn't respond right away, but her eyes glistened. For so long she thought survival meant isolation. That to stay alive she had to shut everyone out. But maybe real survival, it meant finding someone who made you feel seen. Someone who stood between you and the storm, not to fight your battles, but to remind you that you didn't have to fight alone anymore. The next morning they kept driving, past city lines, through empty plains, under wide open skies. And somewhere, between the past and the future, Between fear and freedom, Hailey finally felt something she hadn't in years. Hope. What would you have done in Hailey's shoes? Would you have had the courage to run? To trust a stranger? To finally stand up? To someone who once had complete control over your life? Stories like this aren't just fiction. They reflect the strength it takes to break free from fear, and the hope that can still exist, even in the darkest moments. We want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And what part of Hailey's journey hit you the hardest? Was it her escape, her trust in Miles, or the final choice to leave it all behind? Your voice matters, and your thoughts could help someone else find the courage they need. So share your feelings, theories, or even just send Hailey some love in the comments. And don't forget, subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell, because tomorrow we'll bring you another powerful, emotional story you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, and thank you for being a part of this growing global community of brave hearts and open minds.